Today, let's deploy a Cloudflare worker with Alchemy. We'll cover the basic usage of Alchemy, how to initialize it, how to define your first worker, how to spin up a local development environment. We will initially cover how to deploy from your local machine, but ultimately we'll deploy from within a GitHub workflow. We'll also cover how to persist the state of your resources in Cloudflare itself so that you and your team members have a shared source of truth. And as the cherry on top, we're also going to configure branch previews so that whenever you create or update a pull request, you get a new version of an ephemeral deployment specific to that branch head. And when you ultimately merge or close the PR, it'll clean up that ephemeral deployment for you. All right, so we're in an empty folder called Alchemy Intro. And the first thing we're going to do is bun init y so that we have a package JSON. And then from here, we can bun I Alchemy. Once Alchemy is installed, we'll use the Alchemy CLI and we'll run the login command. This will open up this OAuth flow in the browser. In my case, since I'm already logged into Cloudflare, it's going to take me directly to the permission screen, and I'm going to hit allow. And just like that, it succeeded. So we're going to close out this screen, and we see the success message in our terminal as well. Let's clear this out. Let's also make this text a little bigger, and we'll create a new file, alchemy.run.ts. Within here, we can import Alchemy from Alchemy. And then we're going to create a top-level container for our resources. Call this my app, very original. We'll do our resource definition here. And finally, after all of that, we will finalize. So this is where the magic is going to happen. And within here, we'll create a worker. But in order to create the worker, we need the runtime code to be executed on the worker. So we'll create a new file. It'll be worker.ts. And the shape of a worker is pretty standard. We're going to export a default object. This has a fetch function. We are going to want this to be async. It takes in a request, which is just a global request type, and it returns a promise of response, which is the global response type. And then within here, we implement our worker. Just for the sake of simplicity, we're not going to do anything fancy in here. We're just going to return a response.json and then pass in message equals deploying to CF with Alchemy, and then timestamp equals new date to ISO string. And just for the sake of showcasing the deployment, this is enough. So let's go back to the Alchemy run file, and we're going to want to import from Alchemy/Cloudflare. Now, note that we have all these other providers. Alchemy does support, for instance, deploying to AWS. It has resources for services like Neon and Vercel, but for now, we're just using Cloudflare. So we'll go back here, and we'll bring worker into scope, and we're going to define our worker here by awaiting worker. Here we pass in an ID. This stays the same for the entire lifetime of our app. Call it my worker. And then here we pass in the entry point, and we can point directly to worker.ts. One other thing to note is that by the time you're watching this video, it's possible that entry point will have been renamed to main, but for now, it's entry point. Next, perhaps we will extract from worker the URL, and then let's log it out. We'll open up our terminal again and run bun alchemy deploy. Let's open this URL, and we confirm that the worker is deployed and behaving just as we'd expect. Additionally, we see that there's this new directory, .alchemy. Within here, we have the app scope my app. Within there, we see the my worker resource JSON, as well as a folder my worker. This exists because a resource can have child resources, for instance, a URL. So we have this really simple JSON representation with which we can explore our resources. And this tree is also Alchemy's source of truth. Pretty soon, we're actually going to store this representation in Cloudflare itself so that you and your team have a consistent shared source of truth about your resources. But for now, we'll stick with the local experience while we go over some basics. So let's hide that. And let's go back to the worker. And let's say we change something in this worker. So for instance, showing the full URL, and then we open up our terminal and run deploy again. Alchemy notices that the code has changed and it triggers an update. And now when we open up URL, we're going to see this additional property. And if up here we were to change this to some subpath, that's reflected in the URL. Similarly, the worker would be updated if we changed any of the properties that we passed to the worker, but we won't do that for now. And if we were to run deploy again, we see that it skipped updating the resource because nothing changed. And now if we want to delete the resource, we can run bun alchemy destroy, and it deletes the resource. If we go back to that URL from before and refresh, we see it no longer exists. And similarly, our .alchemy directory now has no JSON inside of it. During development, we can very easily spin up local ephemeral versions of our resources by running bun alchemy dev. And now we see that the URL is on localhost. So we could easily do this on an airplane or a bus or in CI or in Narnia. Our next step is going to be to deploy this in CI. And to do that, we're first going to need to git init. Let's open up a new window. We'll go to github.com, create a new repository, and we'll call it Alchemy Intro. Create the repository. We'll copy the origin line, go back to VS Code, add the remote, add all of the files to staging, sup, and push. And now this should be here. Next, let's come to the continuous integration guide, scroll down just a little bit, and we'll see this workflow here that we can copy. I'm going to open up VS Code again, get out of this, and we'll create a new file, .github/workflows/deploy.yaml, and we'll paste. Now let's go back to our Alchemy run file, and we're going to have to make a few changes. So up here, we will set the state store equal to a function that accepts the scope. And this is the Cloudflare state store, which comes from Alchemy state. And we pass in the scope. This is a constructor, so new. And now when we deploy, it's not going to save JSON. It's going to write to a SQLite database inside of Cloudflare. You could also use an S3 state store or even implement your own state store if you'd rather persist the state of your resources elsewhere. Now, because we want previews for feature branches when we open pull requests, we're going to specify the version. And in the case that the app stage is prod, we actually don't want to pass in a version. But if it's not prod, then we will pass in the app stage. So in the case of this version field, if we pass in undefined, then it's going to assume that it is our production worker. Otherwise, it will create a stage with the name, and this is going to be specified in our GitHub workflow, where we actually do the deployment. But the gist of how stage is specified is we can run bun alchemy deploy, and then pass in the stage here, and then give it a name. So in the case of our preview deployment, the name will be an identifier that's unique to the given commit of that PR. Alternatively, instead of using the app.stage to specify the version, we could get rid of this and implement the versioning by passing an ID. So for instance, worker and then env.GitHub SHA. However, we're going to stick with this version. Now, this is going to be running inside of a GitHub workflow, and we're going to want access to certain environment variables. For instance, the pull request number and the commit SHA. So let's add another import from node process, and we're going to want env. Also, let's format this. And then down here, if env.pullRequest. So if we're in a pull request, then we'll want to create a GitHub comment. So await GitHub comment. This comes from Alchemy GitHub. We give it an ID. So in this case, preview comment. And then the owner is your account or GitHub organization. In my case, since it's in my personal account, it's just going to be Harry Solovey. The repository is going to be Alchemy intro. The issue number is going to be the pull request. Cast is a number. And this might seem strange since this is a comment on a pull request, not an issue. But for the purposes of operations like comments, the GitHub API doesn't really distinguish. And then finally, we can add a body. So here we'll use backticks. And we'll say preview URL equals, and then we can interpolate the URL from above. Maybe let's add 2 line breaks, and we'll say built from, and here we'll use the env GitHub SHA, which will be available in the workflow environment. And we'll get a slice from 0 to 7. And we're getting this error because this might be undefined. Let's just use a non-null assertion because we know it's going to be there. And that's all that we should have to do for the actual Alchemy run file. However, we are going to need to add various secrets to the GitHub repository. So we'll go back to GitHub, settings, secrets and variables, actions, and add a new repository secret. The first secret that we'll add is the Alchemy password. And this can be anything you want. So maybe we'll choose what a cool lib Alchemy is and add the secret. If we go back into VS Code and hover over Alchemy password, it says context might be invalid. But if we restart the extension host, it recognizes that that secret now exists. And so we no longer see the diagnostic. Next, let's add another secret. And this is the Cloudflare email. For me, this is harrysolovey@gmail.com. Please don't spam me. We'll go ahead and add the secret. We'll add another repository secret. And this one will be the Cloudflare API token, which we will have to create. Cloudflare login, manage account API tokens. We'll create a token, scroll down, and we'll use this template for edit Cloudflare workers. All of these options should be fine. We'll have to specify include all zones from an account and select the account. Now we should be able to continue to summary and create the token. Copy the token, go back to the secret input in GitHub and paste. Then add. Next, we're going to create a secret for the Alchemy state token. And this will be used to secure the Cloudflare durable object that stores the state of our resources. To create this, open up your terminal. We'll use the OpenSSL CLI, specifically the RAND, and we want it base 64 encoded and 32 characters in length. And that gives us the token. Let's copy this. Be sure that you don't accidentally include additional white space, and we'll paste it in there. Now, if we reload the window, we shouldn't see any more diagnostics because we've input all of these secrets. So with all of this in place, let's git add, git commit, configure CI, and git push. We'll go back to our repo, and if we take a look at our workflows and deploy, we'll see it deploys here. And voila. Now let's create a feature branch and see if it deploys a preview. So we're back in VS Code. We'll git checkout be my feature. And let's just change the message. Does it work? And push it. Back in GitHub, we will compare and pull my awesome feature and create. We'll give this a few seconds and we have an error. So let's see what it is. Of course, we're trying to create a comment, but we haven't actually given this workflow the ability to write comments. And this is because we didn't include the GitHub token in the secrets. So let's fix that. GitHub token is secrets.github token. And then we should add the same here. And with that, git add, git commit, attempt fix, and git push. And now ignore these other commits where I was figuring out what went wrong initially. The fix was to add the GitHub token, and we see that the Alchemy run successfully commented. If we open up the preview URL, we see the new message. Let's go ahead and merge this. And if we go over to actions and take a look at this workflow, it'll go through and update our main worker. Does it work? I think that's probably a good place to stop for today, and thank you for watching.